hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're making gnocchi. Well, on Friday's show, I brought you guys how to make a gnocchi board or a gnocchi paddle, which is the device that you use to form the potato dumplings known as gnocchi. Now, I said at the end of that show that I was gonna maybe try to convince Mrs. Kenny to join me here on a program and show you guys how to make gnocchi. And I brought the idea up to her and she said, yeah, let's do it. Personally, I think that she's just did it because she wanted some homemade gnocchi, but it doesn't matter. Either way, we got to do the show, and that's what we're gonna do today. Now, truth be told, we have never made gnocchi before this experience on the show. It's been a little bit intimidating, but we decided we were gonna jump in with both feet and give it a whirl, and I have to say that it really worked out for us. But either way, just be known, this is a recipe that we found in a book that she had, and we went with it and tried it, so today is actually footage of our first experience making it. The methods are still the same whether you've been making it on the first day or whether you've been making it for 20 years. So kick back, relax, take some notes if you're interested in making gnocchi, and enjoy the show. Well, to make gnocchi, let's start off with the ingredients that we need. You're going to need flour, you're going to need salt, about 1 pound of cooked potatoes, and 1 egg. Now, the potatoes should be cooked with the skin on. You can boil them if you want, but it's a possibility that you could be adding extra unwanted moisture to your mixture. So these potatoes here were actually baked. So for us, the 1 pound of potatoes equated to be 3 of them. And the very first step that you want to take is peel the skins on them. Now, if you're boiling the potatoes as opposed to baking, you can peel them ahead of time and then boil them. You obviously don't have to boil the potatoes with the skin on. While my wife is peeling the potatoes, I will crack the 1 egg into a bowl and I will beat the living snot out of it. I'm good at this part. And we can put that aside for now. Don't say I didn't help. So much like the tools in the shop, this would be a tool of the kitchen, and this is a ricer. And this does a great job at mashed potatoes, that sort of thing, but you want to use this to be able to make your potatoes workable. So the first thing you want to do is you'll need to cut your potatoes into manageable pieces to fit into the reservoir of your ricer. So in order to use the ricer, you just need to lift your top handle up, place one of your potato pieces inside, and then my wife will push down on the handle to extrude all of the potato out the bottom. And then you'll do that until all your potatoes are riced on your cutting board. So with your potatoes riced, you'll now need 1 cup of all-purpose flour. So now you want to spread your potatoes out along, in this case we're using a cutting board, just kind of spread them out to a semi-thin layer, and then take your egg mixture and drizzle it over the top of your potatoes. Now once that is done, you can sprinkle your 1 cup of flour on top of your potato and egg mixture. And now your last ingredient that you're going to need will be a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. So you can just measure that out, and just like you did with all the other ingredients, just sprinkle it over the top of your entire mixture. So at this point, you can now mix up your potato dough. You've got all your ingredients there. You can use your hands if you wish. You can use a spoon. My wife will be using a dough blade, and you just carefully want to fold the mixture over and over to mix the egg and the flour and the salt through. Eventually, you will end up with a dough, a potato dough. Try not to overwork it if you can. Once you have your ingredients mixed up with the blade, you can knead it and roll it together using your hands to make it a little easier. So a good method to use to mix this together is to fold it over on itself and then press it flat. Fold it over on itself again, press it flat. You don't really need to knead it over and over. It's not like bread, but you want to make sure that everything is well mixed. At this point, you have your dough. Now it should be a slightly sticky mixture and it should be soft. You shouldn't have any lumps in it or anything like that. And at this point now, you can divide it into 8 equal sections. At this point, you want to take each of your pieces, you can lightly flour your cutting board, and you want to roll them out, kind of like you're playing with Play-Doh or plasticine, and just roll them out into ropes that'll be in between 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch in diameter. Once you get it rolled out, you want to cut them into roughly 3/4 inch long pieces. And remember guys, this is not an exact science, just try to get it close. Well, at this point we get to use the gnocchi paddle that we made on last Tuesday's show. And the first thing you want to do to keep your gnocchi from sticking to it is dust it with a little bit of flour. And then from there you can take your little pieces of cut off gnocchi and you just want to press them at the top of your paddle, and then with a slight pressure just roll them down the paddle. What you're trying to do is form them and get little grooves in the gnocchis. Now you can do this with your thumb, as my wife is doing here. It's whatever you're comfortable with. There's no real right or wrong way to do this. I've seen it done as well with the palm of your hand and run it down the paddle.
That's not my palm. No, that just squashed it when I tried to.
Which is awkward for my wife to do, so she'll stick to her thumb method. As you finish forming your gnocchi or your potato dumplings, you can have a baking sheet lined with some parchment paper, and you can just place them all there waiting to get their final cooking. And that's what we're going to cover next. But first, we have to get all these gnocchi formed. Now, if you don't have a gnocchi paddle, you can do it with a fork. And you just press it down to get the ridges and roll it on the fork, and they turn out just fine. Now, what's the purpose of the ridges? The purpose of the ridges is to give somewhere for the sauce to sit that you're going to use over top of this, whether it be a marinara or an Alfredo sauce or something like that. The ridges give the sauce somewhere to stick. So whether you use a fork or a gnocchi paddle, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't take long to get a groove going. Once you get used to the way they feel rolling them on the paddle, you can pretty much get them done fairly quickly. I found that if you have the paddle nicely floured, it works much better than trying to do it on just a lightly floured paddle. Well, cooking gnocchi couldn't be easier. For starters, you want to let them rest for about 20 minutes before you cook them. And it's as simple as placing them into a pot of boiling water. You will cook them until they float. Once they float, they're done, and you can remove them from the water and serve them up. And that's a very quick process that takes about 1.5 minutes. And a little bit of freshly grated Parmesan. Finish that off just nicely. Well, truth be told, those 3 potatoes that we cooked made enough gnocchi that 1/3 of what we made was enough to feed my wife and I as an accompaniment with our chicken Parmesan. So what do you do with this leftover gnocchi? You don't want to cook it. You want to cook it just before serving because it cooks so quickly. What you can do is take this cookie sheet or this baking sheet with your parchment paper, place it right in the freezer and freeze these gnocchi. Freeze them as soon as they're frozen. From there you can put them in a Ziploc freezer bag and keep them to cook later on. Just when you're ready to cook, take them out, throw them in your boiling water while they're still frozen. Once they start floating, they're cooked and away you go. So nothing gets wasted. And there you have it. Homemade gnocchi. Guys, 3 words. Delicious. This stuff was awesome. That marinara sauce with a little bit of fresh grated Parmesan went perfectly as the side dish to go with our chicken Parmesan. It was absolutely amazing. Now, however, was it like your store-bought gnocchi? Of course it wasn't. Because nothing homemade is ever the same as something store-bought. There's always something different about it. And I find the biggest difference here between the homemade and the store-bought, other than ours, I thought, tasted better, was the texture. Ours was a little fresher, a little softer. It wasn't as firm as the store-bought stuff. But I was okay with that, and so was my wife. This stuff, honestly, was easy to make and was a load of fun, and it was delicious. Initially, we thought it was going to be a bit of a pain in the neck, and once you start forming the gnocchi little dumplings, you know what? At the beginning, it started off to be a bit of a struggle, but once we got a groove going, tried different things, a little extra flour on the board, more pressure, less pressure, you really get that feeling for it quickly. And the best part is the ones that you did at the beginning that don't look as pretty, they're still edible. The only thing that's wrong with them is that they don't look as pretty. So all of your practice gnocchis are all edible. Nothing gets wasted. So guys, even though this was our first attempt at making it, it was 100% a success. Absolutely fantastic. We will be doing this again, and by freezing it on the tray with the parchment paper, like I pointed out, we now have enough gnocchi in the freezer for a couple more meals. So win-win all the way around. Guys, if you haven't tried this, or if you've been thinking about trying it after Friday's show with the gnocchi board, but you really didn't know where to go, this is a great basis from a beginner to a beginner. I'm telling you, this works, and we both enjoyed it. It was absolutely, 3 words, delicious. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in this week. This has been a lot of fun. I don't get to do very many shows with my wife, and although she wasn't actually on camera very much, she did do the bulk load of the work. Now, I did the heavy lifting stuff of beating the eggs, but as far as the potatoes and the boiling them, the baking the potatoes and the peeling and the cutting and forming the dough and all that, she did pretty much all of that. So I want to thank her for joining in on today's program and helping out to produce the show. If you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing. You click that bell and then you're not going to miss the notifications of future episodes of the program. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in this week. I hope you've enjoyed the content. I hope you found it delicious looking. I hope you're going to try this for yourself because they really are good. And more importantly, guys, I hope you're going to join me again next week when I bring you yet another Alternative Tuesdays.
God, we're not going to have dinner till midnight.
I am the director here.
Hurry up!
You don't go until I say action. So in order to use the ricer... Really? So in order to use the ricer, you... Okay, hang on. So when I start talking, I say, in order to use the ricer, then you start doing it.
Okay.
Okay.
Pain in the butt.
This is why I film alone, folks. And you will eventually get it firmly... Okay, I'll start that clip over again. Once it's firmly mixed... Firmly? Okay, go ahead. 8 equal sections. 1, 4,
8 relatively equal sections.
8 relatively equal sections.
Does that look like I think that looks like a good. Oh, it's a little fatter on this end. Some ropes about the diameter of my thumb. A little smaller.
And with that little bit of marinara and fresh, let's start over. Don't you laugh.